Hi there, we're going to take a look today briefly at using Photoshop and Illustrator to create some shapes that I can bring into Adobe Dimension. One thing that Adobe Dimension can't do, and it's good that it can't do it in a way, I don't really have the ability to create any models from scratch within Adobe Dimension. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to use Photoshop, and I'm also going to look at Illustrator to build some shapes. Now, this is not going to be an extensive tutorial. It's a brief overview to get you started. And it's a little finicky in Photoshop. I have a new layer here called Layer 1. It's a transparent layer. I want to build a pipe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over in my Tools panel over here, and I'm going to go to the Shapes area here, and I'm going to pick up the Ellipse Tool. Now these are vector shapes within Photoshop. So I'm going to press and hold the Shift key, and I'm going to drag out a circle here. And this is called a path. Now you've got to make sure in the upper left corner of Photoshop, up here in the Control panel, it says Path. I don't want it to say shape. I don't want it to say pixels. I want it to say path. So once that path is drawn, I go to my Paths panel, and I'm going to name this circle. Now I'm going to click off of that for a second to show you don't really see anything here unless you have the path selected in the Path panel, and you can come over here in the vector area of Photoshop and pick up the Path Selection tool and click on it, and you'll see the anchor points in the paths, and I can move this around. Now what I'm going to do next is this. I'm going to click off of this circle path, and I'm going to draw another path. Let's just say I draw it right here, and I'm going to hold down my Shift key and my Alt or Option key, and I'm going to draw out a circle about this big. So this is my work path until I name it. So I'm going to double click. Inner Circle will name this. Now what I'm going to do next is this. I'm going to come over to my Tools panel, and this is important. I'm going to click on the Selection tool here that makes this still selected. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to click on the circle, which is going to deselect the inner circle. I'm going to click on here, and then I'm going to paste in my copied inner circle path. I'm going to move it around, and I'm going to put it right there. In fact, if I want to align these two, I can press and drag out my selection arrow across both of them, and up in the Control panel here at the very top of your screen, I do have the ability to align. I'm going to align on centers, horizontally and vertically. And here comes the key thing. I'm going to click off, and I'm going to click on this inner circle, and I'm going to come up here where it says Path Operations. These are kind of like those Boolean operations. I'm going to use a path operation called Subtract Front Shape. Watch the Path panel on the right. Look at here. See this dark gray in the middle? The white is the object. The dark gray is the background. So now if this worked, I can go up to my 3D menu and come down to 3D Extrusion from Selected Path. Now the 3D portion of Photoshop is turned on, and I've got my tool here, and I'm on my Orbit tool, and look at this. There it is. Just as beautiful as it can be. Now if you don't see this widget here, and you don't see this top view item on the upper left and some icons in the lower right, it drove me crazy for weeks until I accidentally discovered I had to go to View, Show, turn on these 3D items that you want to have on. Otherwise you won't see the widget in the ground plane, the secondary view, and all this, or the lights. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to Properties. And I've got to make sure that over in the 3D panel, I have, quote unquote, this layer picked. I'm going to go up and I'm going to go into Properties, and their third icon in deals with bevels, or caps, I should say. I'm going to click on that, and I'm always put about a 2% bevel on things, because nothing in real life has a perfectly sharp edge. Now, I'm going to go up here to Contour, and I normally would also pick this rounded. Alright, now I made a mistake, so I got to correct myself here. Up at the top where it says sides, I always forget to change it from front to front and back. And now that minor 2% bevel has actually been added to the front and the back of my object. Now, also what I do is I go back to Properties, and I go in the upper left of Properties where you see the little star here, and I change my extrusion depth down to 4 centimeters. Now, there's nothing magic about 4, that's just the kind of the starting extrusion depth that I want, and I keep these at whole numbers. The next thing I'm going to do is I'll show you how to get this into Dimension. You go up under the 3D menu and you pick Export 3D Layer. I'm going to pick my file format as Wavefront OBJ. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to name this. I'm going to name this Pipe 1. I'm going to save it to my local folder. Okay, now I'm going to minimize Photoshop, and I'm going to come into, whoops, you weren't supposed to see that yet. I'm going to come over here to Dimension. Now, in Dimension, what I'm going to do here, and I apologize for this little monkeying around here, I have a brand new document up. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go Command or Control I to import that model. I'm going to go to Local. I'm going to go to Pipe Object, or Pipe 1 Object, and that's just going to put it here. Now, this little widget tells me here that it's off camera view. So I'm just going to click on that and bring it into camera view. I do have my render preview turned on, so I'm going to turn that off for a second. I'm going to make sure I'm on my selection tool. I'm going to hit the letter V. And I'm going to also use some commands like 3 to dolly away from this. I'll use my 1 or my orbit tool to move around. I just want you to see, here's a 3D object that you created. Now the beautiful thing about this, and I'm not going to go into too much more detail here, is if you take your magic wand, I can come over here and click on this surface. I can go edit, I can go cut, I can go edit, I can go paste. Now that gave me a new layer. I'm going to double click on this. I'm going to name it front. Just for fun, you'll get the idea what I'm doing here. I'm going to click on this extruded part, and I'm going to go edit, cut, edit, paste. Another layer, it says, but I know this is my extrusion. And we'll do this next. I'll take my number 1 and I'll get my orbit tool here. Let me go back to selection. Let me try 1. I'll come back here and I'll take my magic wand and I'll click on that, and I'll click here on the back face, and I'm going to cut it. I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to name this back. Alright, let me go back to number 1 here just for a second. So real quickly, I'm going to come over here and just add some things to this quick like a dirty bird. I'm just going to add brass to layer 1. and that's going to be this inside. I'm going to add this blue plastic to the front face. I'm going to add this fine grain, whatever it is, to the back, or to the extrusion. I just know that I can use the magic wand to get a hold of all those faces and then apply different materials if I want to. And then I'm just going to click on my preview. So it's just going to render this up. The biggest thing is, I just wanted to show you, we built that shape within Photoshop based upon paths, and then we turned it into a 3D object, then we, of course, we exported it. Let me go back to Photoshop here for a second. I'm going to minimize Dimension. I'm going to go back to Photoshop and bring up my file here. Not sure why it's not just automatically coming up, but we'll bring her up here. Okay, now let's say that I go over here to paths right now, and I'm going to throw this layer away, and I'm going to take these two work paths and I'm going to select them, and I'm going to delete those just to do a couple more operations here. So I'm going to make a new layer here, and I'm still going to go over to my tools over here, my vector tools. And let's see here, let's take something like the pen tool. Now, can I actually come up here and click and press and drag a path, and another path, another path, another path, and another path? First of all, can I adjust these paths? Yeah. You can come over and pick the selection tool, but you got to go to the direct select tool. Click off, click on the anchor point you want to manipulate, click on the path you want to manipulate. It's just like Illustrator, but if you're not familiar with that, so here you go. So there's another shape. I don't know what it is, but it looks pretty good. So let's go up here, 3D extrusion from selected path, and there you go. So that was kind of strange. Let me undo that. That was kind of strange. Let me go back to my selection arrow. And because I didn't have any other path here to put this other path on top of, it assumed that this was a solid shape. Now, is that true? Wow, I'm kind of buffaloed here by this. Let's see here. This is on, oh, combine shapes. Oh, now let's see what happens. 3D extrusion from selected path. Oh, that's better. Oh my goodness, let me undo that so you can see what I did. The mistake I made was with the path selected and the selection tool selected. I get these commands up here for path operations, and mine was still on subtract. So then it appears Photoshop took my whole artboard and treated it like a shape, and then used this shape to subtract from it. I just wanted to extrude this shape, so I had to be on Combine Shapes. Okay, I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to name it Weird. I'm going to click off, and I'm going to go over here and show you something else. Because I have these vector paths available, I can use the pen tool. I can use these standard tools in here, but here's Custom Shape. Custom Shape is up here where I can pick from a library, and there's literally hundreds of these things. Let me make it bigger so that you can see this a little bit better. Boats. Let's look here. I don't even want to venture trying to extrude something like that. Let's see here. You could try on your own. Let's see. How about wild animals? Let's try the king of the jungle here. And I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to click on Weird. I've got my custom shape picked. I'm going to go up here first though. Make sure the path operation is on subtract, and I'm going to drag out with the shift key the king of the jungle. Notice in the layers panel that it subtracted the shape of that lion from my original weird shape. If I go up here to 3D and I come down to 3D extrusion from selected path, yes, you too, ladies and gentlemen, can cut out that shape from there. I think that's pretty cool. Let me undo again, and undo again. Just a couple more things just to let you know. I'm going to pick, we'll say, a elliptical shape. Before I come over here and draw it, I'm going to go up here to my path operations, and I'm going to pick intersect shape areas. So I'm going to intersect this shape over this shape like this, and the only part it intersects is this area right here. See? Let's see if it will use this as an extrusion. Look at that. Okay, let me undo. Let me undo that path there. Let me delete this path, in fact, this weird path. I'll just throw it away. Let's say I want to do this. I want to take a rectangle and I want to draw out this shape. I would like to save this path as a wall. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my rectangle tool. I'm going to come up here on the path operations and I'm going to say combine shapes. Yeah. And I'm going to take my ellipse tool and I'm going to go kind of in the middle of this. I'm going to hold my Alt key down, Option key. I'm going to draw an ellipse out here, and I'm going to reposition it with the space bar. As long as I got my tool still active, I can hold down the space bar. And I'm going to let up. I'm then going to take my selection tool, and I'm going to select both these paths, and I'm going to make sure this is on combine. And then I'm going to go to 3D extrusion from selected path. And now I have my arc on there. So whether you want to add, subtract, intersect, whatever, you can do that and send that shape out back over to Dimension. If you just get the shape built, maybe you want to add the bevel, maybe you want to come over here and I'll pick again my 2% bevel. I'll change my extrusion down to, let's see here, let me click on the star and I'll bring this over to 4 just as a starting point. Now I am going to kind of see if I can straighten this up a little bit here. It's not a crisis, but I want to have it kind of straight. There we go. And what I'll do here is I'm going to take and then go over here to 3D, export 3D layer, go ahead and change it to an OBJ, click OK, come up here, give it a name, bread, come back to Dimension, go to Window, let's say Made New, don't save the other one, do an import, Command I, Control I, here's bread, and I should have my object here. Now I don't see it, so wonder why. Let's go over here to Camera, Frame Selection. There it is. And then you can see the bevel that's on there too. Okay, so let's do this. let me bring up a new dimension file. And we'll bring something into this again just here in a few seconds. So bear with me here as I do a little housekeeping. I'm going to go over to Illustrator. Now this looks like kind of a weird mess, doesn't it? I've got a rectangle here, I've got this circle over this rectangle, I've got these 4 rectangles inside of here. So you know that I'm going to use this as maybe an archway into my building. You know that. I'm going to use these 4 squares to act as windows on this window frame. And I'm going to use this shape, and I want it to cut out this curve in the upper part of the building and this curve in the upper part of the building. So these are all vector shapes. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to press and drag across to select all my vector shapes. I'm going to come over in my tools panel and I'm going to pull up the wonderful magic tool called Shape Builder Tool. Now, if you're not familiar with Shape Builder, it allows me to subtract and add things together. So over here, I don't want this shape. So I'm going to hold down my Alt option and I'm going to click. I don't want this shape. So it cuts it out of there. I come over here and I go minus, 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 minus. Now what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to press and drag through so it makes this all one shape. Now here's where the magic happens. I've got all this selected. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go copy. I'm going to go to Photoshop. I'm going to make a new document. I'm going to paste. The quickest and easiest thing I've found to work has been pixels. So I'm going to pick pixels. It has the selection around, like a transformation selection. I'm going to hit my Enter key or Return key to accept it. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this layer number 2 and I'm going to go up here under 3D and I'm going to pick 3D extrusion from selected layer. Let's see what happens. I think I made a mistake. Let's see here. Yep, I didn't get my entryway knocked out, did I? Well, let's undo. Let's undo. Let's undo that paste. Let's go back to Illustrator and see what I've done wrong. Well, this looks pretty good. Let me click in here. Let me go. Oh, remember I drug through this and made it all one shape? I bet you now I have to subtract it. I bet you a way to check this before I get out of here is to change over to a rectangle tool, draw out a rectangle really quick, fill it with a color, and then right click and send it to the back. Yep, all those are open. So let me delete the orange. Let me go Command or Control A here. Whoop, I gotta get hold of my selection tool. Command A to select all these. I'll just drag through them. Copy. I'm gonna go back over to Photoshop. I'm gonna paste. Paste as pixels. I'm gonna come up here. I'm gonna hit Enter. I'm gonna go up here to 3D. I'm gonna go 3D extrusion from selected layer. I'm going to look at that. Look at that. I like that. Then I can come over here, click on my bevel. I'm going to add my 2%. I'm going to click on the star in the properties, change my extrusion down to 4. I'm a pretty happy camper. That looks really good. So now what I'm going to do is I'll just pull it back forward here a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up under 3D, and I'm going to say export 3D layer, OBJ format, wall with cutouts, and we'll just save it. Come over to Dimension, import, Command or Control I, click on my camera tool to go to frame selection, and there it is. So I just want you to know, if you're familiar with working with Photoshop and or Illustrator, you basically can draw almost any shape out you want, as long as it's going to be extruded, to build up models, or scenes I should say, in Adobe Dimension. Here's an example right here. Let me hit the spacebar and bring this up on my Mac here. So here's a circular shape where I went in and I used some of these custom shapes within Photoshop of the wild animals to cut holes and make a coin here. I brought in a vector file of the World Wildlife Fund logo and extruded that and brought that into here. So I also went over here and of course just made this shape with my pen tool in Photoshop or Illustrator, made these shapes and just punched holes in here, same with this animal here. And here's one of those archways. That's basically a situation where I would draw a rectangle and I put that arch shape in there and subtracted it, so I have this look of an arch. Okay, it's not the totally exhaustive explanation of this, but it's something I wanted to show you how to get started making some shapes of your own, especially if you know how to use Illustrator and or Photoshop. The Photoshop technique is a little more, to me, a little more challenging. I like Illustrator where I can use my shape builder tool to cut out shapes, merge shapes, and so on. So I just wanted you to know about this, and if we have a chance, we'll go into a little more detail on this a little bit later. Thank you very much.